Mark Wallace. Great to see you both. Hello to you. As ever, let's take a look first at the front pages. The Times is reporting from the Davos summit, where Donald Trump attacked prophets of doom on climate change and called on governments to ignore what he called predictions of the apocalypse. That's also the lead for the Financial Times, with President Trump dismissing climate activists as being alarmist, while the Eye refers to the US president as the Earth's #1 climate change denier. The Telegraph reports on a new code of conduct for the internet that will make it a legal requirement for social media firms to protect children from harmful content. That's also the lead for the Metro, which says breaches of the new guidelines could result in steep fines for well-known tech firms. In the Express, the Justice Secretary, Robert Buckland, says violent criminals will no longer be automatically freed halfway through their sentences. The Guardian alleges that the phone of Amazon billionaire Jeff Bezos was hacked after he was sent a WhatsApp message by the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. The Mirror is leading on Ozzy Osbourne's Parkinson's diagnosis. That is also the lead story for The Star, which says the 71-year-old is planning to head to Switzerland for treatment. And also in The Sun, with the musician saying that he hid his diagnosis for a year. And the Daily Mail reports that Princess Diana's niece has joined the Queen's grandson in appearing in milk adverts in China. Plenty to talk about. Jenny Kleeman and Mark Wallace are here. You want to start with The Guardian, the news about Jeff Bezos' phone. Explain this to us.
This is an incredible story of intrigue and conspiracy. I can see the drama being made. Well, actually, maybe not. It's not that visual. It's all to do with the richest man in the world and Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, who henceforth we will refer to as MBS, because that's much easier to say, exchanging messages on WhatsApp, and MBS sending Jeff Bezos a virus which allowed his phone to be hacked. This all came about because, I don't know if you remember, but about a year ago, Jeff Bezos was, the National Enquirer disclosed that Jeff Bezos had been having an affair. He got divorced. His wife, Mackenzie's ex-wife, is now the richest woman in the world because of the divorce settlement that she got. And so Jeff Bezos wanted an investigation into how the National Enquirer found out his private text messages with the woman he was having an affair with. And it seems that results of that investigation have come through.
Investigation into his phone, was it?
His phone,
right.
Into why things were leaked from his phone. And it seems it all comes down to MBS sent him a video which allowed the contents of his phone to be disclosed. And this is particularly significant because Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. And Jamal Khashoggi, who was murdered by the Saudi regime last year, was a columnist for the Washington Post. And this all happened beforehand. So obviously, Saudi Arabia had an interest in knowing what was going on in the Washington Post. So these are quite explosive allegations, but they're also a window onto the world of some of the most powerful people on the planet, some of the richest people on the planet, how they send each other messages and viruses.
Yeah, the idea that they're kind of chatting away over WhatsApp at the same time as having the involvement, one would presume, of kind of security services and snoopers in actually using this direct phone-to-phone conversation between two individual, kind of famous, worldwide, notorious players in global geopolitics and business, actually directly kind of hacking in that way. It's also, of course, yet more evidence. I mean, it's a bit hard to further damage the reputation of a dictatorial regime that hijacks and then chops up journalists who criticise it. I mean, your reputation's pretty low at that point already. But it's another reminder of, and I suspect there'll be quite a lot of people who've been in contact with senior Saudis who will now be reconsidering the kind of messages that they're willing to open if this is true.
I mean, the Times has picked up on it as well, hasn't it? Saudi Crown Prince accused of hacking the world's richest man. These are explosive allegations. Have we had any comment from the Saudis on this, or is that not forthcoming?
Nothing so far, although, I mean, I think all the information seems to be coming from Jeff Bezos' side, but the details are incredible. Large amounts of data were extracted from Mr. Bezos' phone within hours. Imagine there's going to be interesting stuff on his phone. So, yes, I mean, this story is going to run and run. I'd love to know what this video was that was sent. What did he think he was watching? What video versus MBS and Jeff Bezos.
It's probably a cat video at some point, knowing how everyone uses the internet. But suffice to say, if they start WhatsApping you any statements, I'd be a little bit wary of opening them. It's also a reminder, of course, that while Jeff Bezos is rich enough and powerful enough to get this investigated and found out, that wealth and power didn't protect him from being vulnerable to an attack like this. Even he is vulnerable to this kind of hacking, lots of really sensitive data within hours of opening a message from someone.
And this is how hacking happens. It's through kind of Trojan things that look like it's your friend sending you something.
Human error.
Yes.
I mean, does this give credence to people like Edward Snowden, Ed Snowden, WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, who tried to get all of this out there, or is this still stuff we shouldn't really know about on a global scale?
I don't think you need to know the personal contents of somebody's phone on a global scale. I think there should be some limits to privacy.
And I think when you talk, but one thing, of course, about Edward Snowden and Julian Assange is that in both those cases, again, you see personal stories bound up with geopolitics and the obvious involvement of Russia as a malign actor, backing or working with, collaboration with both of those people as another example.
Yeah. We go to Trump. No connection, obviously. Earth's #1 climate denier. He's and the Financial Times also leading on this as well. He's been quite explosive, hasn't he, at the World Economic Forum in Davos?
Yes, he's told them that he is a very big believer in the environment, end quote, which is good to know.
He believes in it.
He's heard about it a bit. Maybe even seen one. But this is, in some ways, this is quite a grim reflection on Davos. I think this is meant to be something where the world's most powerful and influential people and decision makers and policy makers around the world get together and decide the future of the world economy, the World Economic Forum. But instead, the only time it really seems to matter is as a backdrop for people to say actually how much they're willing to snub it, because it's become a symbol around the world of, frankly, an out-of-touch elite. You don't have to agree with Donald Trump on this to realise that what he's playing is not to the audience in the room, but to his audience back in the US ahead of the election. In the same way, albeit on a different topic, that the British government, Boris Johnson quite notably, isn't there delivering a speech at all, because the message in the UK is actually the stuff to be going on with at home.
Yes, indeed so. I mean, he was one of a number of billionaires there, most of whom are singing from the climate change hymn sheet, aren't they? Is he looking isolated? And does it matter on a global stage?
I think on a global stage, he was looking like he was speaking a different language to a lot of the people there. When you look at how Goldman Sachs are no longer investing in Arctic oil, we have had there has been a kind of sea change in this idea that in order to thrive in business, you have to be taking these ideas seriously. I remember Davos last year, where the front pages were all about the amount of carbon produced by all of the private jets to take people there. There is a sense that things have changed in terms of rhetoric, if not in terms of too much action. But yeah, I think maybe you're probably right. Donald Trump doesn't care what people at Davos think. He wants to be seen as someone who doesn't care about what he calls the perennial prophets of doom. I don't think he wrote that phrase, perennial prophets of doom.
Perennial.
I don't think he did. He was saying, he wants to be an optimist, and it's just ridiculous, this idea that you can fight climate change and protect the planet with optimism. You need tangible changes in behaviour.
Americans have always said that technology could, the carbon sinks or whatever it might be.
You know what? We have carbon sinks. They're called trees. It's ridiculous. This idea that
he said they're joining in that campaign.
This is such an American idea that let's spend more money to solve a problem that we could easily solve by just changing our behaviour.
Firstly, I'm not sure it is a problem we can easily solve by changing behaviour.
Wow.
It may be a problem that it may be necessary to change behaviour in various different ways. Part of the other tragedy of Donald Trump choosing to be the face of this topic is that he inevitably goes wildly over the top on and actually undermines some points that do need to be made. I think it's worth pointing out, not in the way that he has, I think it's worth pointing out that when you have people from Extinction Rebellion saying that 6 billion people are forecast to die from the outcome of climate change, that is not a scientific claim to be making. It simply has no basis in scientific fact or forecast. I think it's reasonable to say that there are ways in which technology and amelioration can help in the response to climate change. All of those things are going to lose when Donald Trump decides to use them as part of his campaign to pick on a teenager.
But the fact that this is the lead story for the Financial Times, Does that mean that business kind of gets it now, and business will be doing things to ameliorate some of the impact of our production of carbon globally? Or
I think,
am I being too optimistic
I
about
think
that?
the business kind of gets it. I don't know whether or not enough is changing quickly enough, and certainly not quickly enough for Greta Thunberg, who does use a kind of catastrophic language. But I mean, for her, it is straightforward for her, and I get where she's coming from, where she sees it as a massive climate catastrophe emergency. Massive things have to happen now. Last year, as she says, she turned up there saying our house is on fire. Now Australia literally is on fire, and that doesn't seem to be enough to motivate people to change enough. I do think things are changing. There is a sense of urgency that was not there a few years ago. A large part of it does come from Greta Thunberg, and good luck to her. And I think, yeah, Trump is looking like a bit of an outdated dinosaur in the face of all of this.
And we'll still all boil the kettle too many times a day and put the washing machine on, won't we, and forget that all of this, uses fuel around the world.
Go and recklessly fly to a global
Well,
economic forum.
yeah, but it's hard to stop using what we've already used, isn't it? That's the problem.
I think it's a generational thing. I think it's, you're a nativist in the world in which you're born, and I hope that my children are growing up in an era where you don't do that so casually.
But I also think it's got to be, if you want to change behaviour, if you want to change public policy, you want to change economies in a really fundamental way, you not only need to point to things that you believe are wrong, firstly you need to point to those in the correct places, you also need to encourage what you believe to be right. So I think it would be worthwhile, for example, looking at where the UK has done some quite impressive things on this front. I also think it would be frankly better spent people dealing with, say, talking to the Chinese government about this than to boardrooms that already agree with them.
Yeah, and actually looking at these, Earth's #1 climate change denier, or Trump calls for prophets of doom to be rejected, as the Times said, Mr. Trump will not mind that, given his Senate trial is just starting in Washington, the third time ever that has happened to a US president, and now he's being talked about something else. That's job done.
Anything but impeachment.
Indeed so. Time of the night to remind you that Kay Burley will be on in the morning, dissecting the impeachment proceedings in the United States, discussing political matters too back here. She will be joined by the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps. That is Kay Burley at breakfast, live from Westminster from 7 o'clock in the morning. Plenty more, though, still to come on the press preview, including the very latest on the Labour leadership campaign. With me is Jenny Kleeman. I'm Mark Wallace. It's not that I'd forgotten, I was just, right.
I don't know.
Oh, dear. Right, let's go to the Labour leadership thing quickly. Jess Phillips pulls out.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a shame, really, because Jess Phillips, obviously, I don't agree with her about a lot of things, but she's different from what's, frankly, quite a increasingly bland field of Labour leadership candidates. If anything, I think she probably made a bit of a mistake in her campaign by trying to button down what it is that actually has made her quite engaging and interesting, and somebody who a lot of her fans have warmed to. Actually, you ended up not really seeing or hearing that much of her in this campaign when she's made her name by being somebody who has something to say.
Yeah, bland. Rebecca Long-Bailey wouldn't agree with you. I'm from Salford. No one messes with me is the Mirror's take on it. The fight for Labour. We meet the left-wing candidate, not the continuity candidate.
No, she says that's disrespectful.
Right.
Although she hasn't done a lot to distance herself from Jeremy Corbyn, who she's given 10 out of 10 for and says wouldn't change anything. God, I hate these kind of political interviews where they try and make themselves sound funky and interesting. It says here at the end, after teasing last week that she may have tried drugs in Amsterdam, she reveals she was a bit of a clubber, singling out the Prodigy as a favourite. Whoa, she's edgy.
You missed out the best bit. It continues. The guilty pleasure is Greg's vegan sausage rolls. I had some on Saturday, some on Monday, and another 2 today. I'm not even vegan. Yes. Which is actually, when I say bland, basically the most interesting thing that she's had to say recently. This idea that she's now finding it insulting or patronising to suggest that she's the Corbynite continuity candidate. This is the person who said, when asked to score Jeremy Corbyn's performance as Labour leader, that you give him 10 out of 10. I mean, what as? What as? Not as potential Prime Minister or a party leader, but she's been working very hard to scoop up that Corbyn loyalist vote. She's been struggling to do it to some extent. Keir Starmer's been giving her quite a run for her money. And now she's saying, actually, she doesn't want to be the Corbynite you're calling that continuity candidate. You can't really have it both ways.
But she's likely to get 2 unions, isn't she, under her belt? Lisa Nandy, who is just a small picture there, obviously managed to scoop up the GMB, which was quite a coup, wasn't it? It looks like she will also get over the line.
There is a, if you excuse the use of the word, there is a momentum to her campaign, and she did very well in the hustings on Saturday. As somebody who's definitely not a Conservative supporter and who would really like to see a strong Labour Party resurrected from the absolute mess of the last election result, Rebecca Long-Bailey depresses me. I am sad about Jess Phillips. However, her entire brand was about being honest and unspun, and she could clearly see that there was no place for her in this campaign anymore. Maybe she's going to hang around at the back and come back after the next election, which will be very difficult for whoever wins the Labour leadership campaign to win. I very much hope that there will be drastic change, but there's a huge mountain to climb for whoever wins on the 4th.
It shouldn't just be Labour supporters who want the Labour Party to actually look at itself, find out where it's gone wrong and reinvigorate, because it's good for our country when we have a proper competition. It's bad for any government to have an opposition which doesn't really press it, doesn't deliver proper scrutiny. It's bad for the people when that doesn't happen.
We've suffered for 3 years from both sides being so feeble.
Yeah, but if Labour need to find some way to deal with the competence problem, they need to find some way to deal with the problem of the ethics of what Jeremy Corbyn was associated with in many cases, and they need to find some way to deal with the practicality and popularity of their actual economic ideas. I'm not sure a lot of this self-examination has even started. If they did it properly, they could bounce back faster than a lot of Tories assume.
Yes, although how you win without Scotland and without large parts of the north would be an interesting proposition for them, wouldn't it? Final story, the Daily Mail. Diana's niece is milking it too. This is in China after Peter Phillips was seen advertising, was it Jersey milk?
Yeah, you know that film Lost in Translation where Bill Murray is in Japan shooting commercials for whiskey he hopes that nobody will see. This is what the royal family have been doing, but it's not whiskey, it's milk, and it's not Japan, it's China. Here is Lady Kitty in a photo shoot at the British Museum advertising milk in China. I mean, they've got to make a living somehow, but it just shows, if you're a member of the royal family, that's, you know, you can't help trading off the royal connection, really.
Yeah.
But this is part of the result of the Queen quite wisely trimming back the royal family. They've had this policy for some years now. You're going to retreat to a kind of core royal family, which would be a much easier and more persuasive thing to communicate to the tax-paying public about where their money goes. One effect of that is this, and obviously the unwritten element to this is the speculation of, is this what the future holds for Prince Harry? Is he going to be hawking Welsh cakes to South Koreans anytime soon?
He's not going to have to do that.
Yes, or threatening the media again, which he has done with
he's going to do some
paparazzi photographs of his wife.
There's going to be some enormous book deal. They'll get offered an enormous amount of money to write a book. They'll write a book.
But we all know, unfortunately, the money comes for the worst things that you put in such a book, so that's the trouble.
Time to say a good night. Thank you both very much indeed. Mark Wallace, Jenny Kleeman, thank you.